Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to my channel, Hairliciously. If you guys are new to the channel, please make sure to subscribe so you guys are updated on hair loss and hair transplant topics, as well as updates on current hair loss treatments in the pipelines. Visit my website at hairliciously.com to purchase your microneedling device, which is scientifically proven to stimulate hair growth, my low-level laser therapy cap, DHT blocking shampoo, conditioner, and serum, hair growth vitamins, and a few other products to help those who are losing hair. So in today's video topic, I wanted to talk about Joe Rogan's hair loss journey. If you guys don't know who Joe Rogan is, he's probably most well known as the host for Fear Factor. This was a show back in the early 2000s where contestants were, doing crazy shit like eating buffalo testicles, going into a tub full of snakes, crazy there kind of stuff that people did for money. And I just remember watching this guy on TV during my high school years. And I will say that it was actually a pretty good show. He's also known for being a UFC commentator. And nowadays, he's probably the most known for his podcast show, The Joe Rogan Experience on YouTube and Spotify, which recently underwent an exclusive licensing deal that's worth like $100 million. So he's had a lot of success over the years with his podcast primarily. He's been interviewing a lot of famous people. And his podcast covers various topics from politics to the possibility of like aliens and extraterrestrial life, to drugs and sports and life, pretty much anything and everything. And the interesting thing about Joe is that he's also discussed about his hair loss journey in a few of his podcasts.
Well, I had a hair transplant. That was the dumbest thing I've ever done.
That's
One of the
David
dumbest
Feldman.
things.
That's what he did.
I have this giant scar on the back of my head. It looks like a smile.
The fact that he actually underwent not one, not two, but 3 hair transplants at a young age due to him losing hair. So he started losing his hair in his early 20s, and by the time that he hit his mid 20s to early 30s, he was already a number 3, and he continued to lose more and more hair. And this was a difficult time for him, as it is with anyone who's suffering from hair loss. He was making a living as an actor on news radio, and for him to lose hair, at such a young age just really freaked him out. And the funny thing is that he said that he knew that he wasn't an ugly dude, and the way he looked had at least some effect in him, helping him with his gigs, his comedy shows and TV shows. So he knew that he actually had to be proactive to treat his hair loss. So he jumped on Minoxidil in the early 1990s, which saved his hair temporarily, but eventually his hair loss, still continued.
Wow, I saved it though with the Minoxidil, and the Minoxidil was hanging in there. But after a while, it was still falling out. And I was like, God, I gotta do something about it.
And this is from the fact that Minoxidil should never be used as a primary source of monotherapy. Minoxidil is simply a growth stimulant. It's not going to fight the androgens. It does help proliferate, new hair follicles, helps increase density, and it helps prolong the androgen phase. But like I said, it's not going to do anything to treat the root cause of genetic hair loss, which is due to the androgens, testosterone, and primarily DHT, which for the most part is going to cause hair miniaturization. And the thing about like Minoxidil is that the success rate is only like 40%, and the absorption rate really sucks. And if you do lack the sulfotransferase enzyme needed to convert Minoxidil into Minoxidil sulfate, you are not going to be a good responder to Minoxidil. So this is why Joe continued to lose hair since the androgens weren't really being dealt with. More so because during this time, Finasteride wasn't introduced and it wasn't FDA approved until 1997. Had he hopped on Finasteride on the early onset of hair loss, he would have likely been able to slow down further progression at a minimum. But the problem was that it wasn't readily available during the time that he experienced hair loss. And in one of his podcasts, he also did state that he did get on Finasteride once it was readily available, but he started experiencing these side effects in terms of, sexual dysfunction, low quality erections, low energy. So he ended up just stopping Finasteride. And then at the age of 26 or 28, he also had his first FUT hair transplant. Remember that this was during the time where FUE didn't exist, and most hair transplants were very pluggy. They were like these mini grafts, which led to very unnatural looking results with subpar density. And the worst part for him was that it left a big scar in the back of his scalp. This was the era where hair transplants were in its infancy, and Joe probably didn't get the best results because he also mentioned the fact that he regretted getting a hair transplant after, and that he should have just shaved it off in the get-go. He also gave us like this good illustration of how he describes the transplanted hairs, and he says that the hair follicles or like taking people from, you know, like where everyone's healthy and then moving them to a town where everyone is dying, and how the hair follicles were like cancer patients just coughing and just dying.
It's like taking people from a town where everybody's healthy and moving them into a town where everybody's dying.
And while this really isn't like the best analogy to, you know, obviously compare cancer patients to miniaturizing hair,
It's just all sad hair, sad, sick hair, coughing, dying people. It's like having a cancer patient living on your head.
it kind of is true to an extent. If you received a hair transplant in the mid to late 1990s and early 2000s, chances are that your hair transplant came out like shit. And out of all the people that I know who had hair transplants during this time period, I actually don't know of a single person who was content with the results that they got. All of them either had additional hair transplants or repair work done to increase density or to fix up their messed up hairlines, or they just ended up having to just shave their heads altogether, because the truth is, you know, the hair transplants back in the days were still very medieval and they simply just sucked ass. They didn't look natural, density was horrible, it left you with this nasty looking scar on the back of the scalp, and it was nothing compared to what we have nowadays. And if you think about it, you know, hair transplants just really came a long way, and we now have the technology and the advances to the point where a lot of the good reputable doctors are able to provide natural looking results. And, you know, don't get me wrong, you know, there are still plenty of doctors, awful doctors who just should not even do any hair transplants. But for the most part, we have better tools and we have better knowledge of how hair transplants should be. And even for people with like bad density, you know, doctors can still utilize body and beard hairs for additional density and coverage. And I've seen some amazing work by some doctors who were able to transform like Nord 7s to Nord 2s via FUE. And, you know, I don't know if you guys know of the other hair loss YouTuber, Joe Tillman, but he's had like 9 or 10 hair transplants that stemmed back in the early 1990s. And he too had to undergo several procedures because the early hair transplants just really didn't deliver, and he had just really bad, horrible results initially as well, until better techniques and reputable doctors emerged. For Joe Rogan, his main problem was that, you know, he didn't take any anti-androgens or 5-alpha reductase inhibitors to slow down further hair loss. And he unfortunately received multiple FUT hair transplants at a time where hair transplants weren't just really developed. And, you know, he simply could have also just been a bad candidate. Even if he were on hair loss medication, there is a possibility that he wouldn't have responded favorably as a result of his sensitivity to androgens, and maybe he was just destined to be a Nord 7. So even to this day, like whenever he discusses about hair transplant topics on his podcasts, he's very anti-hair transplant. He's very against anyone getting a hair transplant because of the bad experience that he went through. And he even goes as far as saying that even if he had a full head of hair, he would just shave it off. But, you know, I feel like we can all agree that most people who end up having a full head of hair would still want to style it and just do things that others can't. I don't think Joe would ever be a good candidate for hair transplant given his extent of hair loss, but I think if Joe were to undergo a hair transplant today with one of the more reputable doctors using the FUE technique or even the FUT, I think he would at least have a different outlook on how much hair transplants have come along. But I'm pretty certain that he likely wouldn't get a hair transplant, mainly because he's accepted the fact that he's bald. He's already making a lot of money through his podcasts. He's married with 2 kids. And like I said, you know, given his extent of hair loss as a Nord 6, Nord 7, he probably wouldn't even be a good candidate in the first place. But, you know, it's still unfair for him to say that hair transplants don't work and that everyone losing hair should just shave their heads. There's plenty of people who are taking Finasteride and even Dutasteride without experiencing any adverse side effects. It's a drug that's been FDA approved in the US for decades with good solid safety profile, and most users are able to slow down further progression of hair loss. There's a lot of good doctors and clinics that provide exceptional results, and I think that if you guys are really willing to treat hair loss and are a good candidate, there's a lot of good treatments available nowadays, both conventional and experimental. And also the ones that are currently in the pipelines that hold a lot of promise. I myself have been taking Finasteride for, you know, like four years now, all without adverse side effects. And after my 2 hair transplants over the past 5 years, I've been very content with the results that I got over at Motion Clinic and have been able to maintain the hairs from further progression of hair loss. And, fingers crossed, hopefully it stays that way in the long run. So all in all, not everyone is willing to take drugs to slow hair loss, and there's nothing wrong with those who simply want to shave their heads. You have YouTube channels like Bald Cafe for that kind of stuff. But for the majority of men who want to stop hair loss and are considering hair transplants, hair loss medications may likely have to be a part of your daily regimen. It's something that comes along with hair transplants, unless you want to, continue to lose hair despite getting, expensive hair transplants. The unfortunate thing is that genetic hair loss is always progressive, and the only way to halt it currently is with medication. It's also a bit surprising to see that Joe Rogan had side effects from Finasteride. And I'm not trying to claim that he was lying or doubting the fact that he did have side effects. But we also have to understand that he might have also been on TRT and growth hormone treatment, and also other anabolic steroids, which is known to raise testosterone and DH levels, which can lead to accelerated hair loss as well as sexual side effects he was experiencing. Let alone, other drugs that he's known to purportedly have been taking. So it's one of those things where people attribute these acclaimed, side effects to Finasteride when they actually don't really know what's truly causing it. Anyway, that wraps up this video on Joe Rogan and his hair loss and hair transplant journey. Let me know if you guys have any questions in the comments section below. If you guys are looking for a good hair transplant clinic, make sure to check out my description box below. Motion Clinic in South Korea and Cosmetica at Istanbul, Turkey are one of the top clinics in the world that's worth checking out. Thanks again for watching, and I will talk to you guys in my next video. Take care.